Where there's a will, there's a way. And there is a way for the Ohio State coaching staff to learn some things over the next few weeks so that the next time the team's on the football field, it is not their final game of the college football season.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, December 8th in the year 2022, and I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. During today's episode, we will discuss how the Buckeyes should approach adding players via the transfer portal, and we'll discuss the basketball team as the Buckeyes on the basketball court will be hosting and playing in the first Big Ten game of the season. But before we get to any of that, the last time we saw the football team play a game, the coaches got outcoached. Now, I will say this also. It was not the first time, I believe, that they have gotten outcoached this year. However, when you're playing in the biggest game of the season, also, it's rivalry weekend. It's the game that decides if you'll play in the Big Ten championship game. A lot on the line, and that's why the coaches getting outcoached got exposed in a way that it did. And I do believe over the next few weeks as we lead up and build up to the game against the Georgia Bulldogs in the college football playoff, Ryan Day, Kevin Wilson, Jim Knowles, Tony Alford, all the coaches on Ohio State's coaching staff, I truly believe there is a will and desire for them to not get outcoached and to coach the best game of their lives. And there is a way for that to happen. It's very, very simple to me, this conversation. And so it's not something that I do think is far-fetched or is way out there in left field, though I do believe these are things that the coaches need to get outside of themselves and away from some of their tendencies during the season and just realize if we coach our game and if we make changes and adjustments instantly, we can get this thing done. But one word comes to my mind, and it's a phrase that the coaches cannot be. The word is stubborn, and the Ohio State coaches cannot be stubborn in the game against Georgia. Take numbers away from it. Take defending national championship away from it. Take the records away from it. Take the SEC championship and the Buckeyes not winning their division. Take all of that away from it. And you look at this game as a whole. A football coach realizes that in the next game, a Georgia coach or an Ohio State coach, they realize that this could be the final game of their season. And for some of them, it could be the final time that they coach at this university. Kevin Wilson specifically will be the last time that he coaches at Ohio State, as he's going to be the Tulsa head coach coming up very, very soon. I'm sure there's some coaches at Georgia that'll be leaving, and that'll be outside of Athens, going to coach elsewhere. Why? That's the way college football works. If you're an assistant, a lot of times you're going to try to be poached, pulled away from where you currently are by other schools. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And ultimately, I do believe that if the coaches continue to be stubborn, and not just rotations, but the lack of adjustments and not instantly changing things, the Buckeyes can lose this game, man. Yeah, I know it's December 8th. I know the game is played on the 31st of December. I get all of those things. But let's keep it in proper context. These coaches have been stubborn all year long. You've heard me say previously, there are things on offense. You'll hear it on tomorrow's show with my guy, Jeff Hunt, where we discuss the things that the Buckeyes, I think they should do on offense that they have not done. I do think would aid them and help them in the running game. The stubbornness, not just in doing the athletes a disservice by being very hush-hush about the injuries, but also their ability and their trend to be stubborn, it's not a good one. It's not a good one at all. Ryan Day leads a good football program. A football program that if it did not play in the Big Ten Conference, I do believe the Buckeyes would be looking and they would have more losses on their schedule. Imagine the Ohio State Buckeyes in, let's say, the Big 12 or even the SEC this year. Now, granted, Georgia's schedule, they didn't play. They had the easier of the two routes. The easier, I won't say easier of the two routes. It's a really good football team. But Georgia had an easy route, you ain't want to say. But if Ohio State play in the SEC, I do think they have more than one loss on the year because one's going to come to the team up north. I still think that rivalry is going to still stay intact if they didn't play in the same conference. And then ultimately, you're playing against in the conference that has that sends the most guys to the NFL every single year. You may say, Jay, you should be a Big Ten homer. No, I'm a realist. And realistically, I understand the SEC is the best football conference in America, which is why Ryan Day and those coaches on the coaching staff can't be stubborn. You cannot be. No. We've seen the stubbornness. I mentioned going into the Michigan game. How Michigan's going to come out with 4 or 5 offensive linemen and have heavier sets, and you should probably want to think about using 5 D linemen, more of a 5-2 old school look. Why? Because you're going to need to do something to combat the heavy sets that Michigan throws at you. What do we see? We didn't see that. We saw you stick with the 4-2-5, occasionally bringing in a third linebacker, occasionally sometimes taking DBs off the field or bringing in extra linebackers. Nothing you did worked. I'm all about the beef up front because if you have 4 D linemen and those guys get covered up, but then you also allow those offensive linemen to get a free release to the guys at the second level, the linebackers, it'll matter if you bring in 4 linebackers. Ultimately, what you're doing is allowing the offensive line of the opposition to get to the second level easier. That's just one area. The Buckeyes coaches cannot be stubborn the next time they're on the field because if they are, it will be the final time this team plays football in 2022, and ultimately we'll be having a lot more interesting and colorful conversations about Ryan Day, about the program that he leads, and why in the world is that in the biggest game of the year in this season, the Ohio State coaches collectively got out-coached. You can say whatever you want to say about the Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year. I was high on that game, higher than most people. I understand what you want to say about the Iowa game, 54-10, but that was when things started to trickle down and not be great for this football team. Then you go to the Penn State game. Yeah, if it wasn't for some plays defensively late in the game, I don't care what Stroud did in the fourth quarter. I think Penn State wins that matchup, especially because they're at home. The Northwestern game, the Maryland game, the game against Michigan, we all have seen the coaching staff do things that don't really make sense at times, which is why they cannot be stubborn and stuck in their ways in the game against the Georgia Bulldogs in the Peach Bowl. Because if they are, the season will end on the final day of 2022. The season may end in 2022, but you have to constantly be preparing for next season, which makes me wonder and think, how should this team prepare for next season right now before this year ends? We'll discuss that next right here on Locked On Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's fast, free, and easy to create a job post on LinkedIn Jobs. Once you create said job post, add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your fine podcast. The transfer portal this year's transfer portal is different and looks different than what we saw a year ago. The powers that be, whoever they are, we all know that there are some people in Indianapolis, but some of us don't know their names, even though we think we should, have decided that there should be 2 transfer portal windows. The first window, I find it being opened at a weird time in the sport. What I don't find is that there are so many players, I believe 1,000 plus, within the first 24 hours of the portal being opened that have entered said transfer portal. The first of 2 windows, we're in the middle of that right now. The first week of that is right now at this point in time. And Ohio State has an interesting task. Build for next year via the portal, as well as build and work on this year to try to win a national championship. I know Ryan Day last year, a year ago, he stated that he talked about how he wasn't going to put a lot of time and energy into the portal. He's going to be very, very delicate and specific with the athletes they go after and trying to make sure that the locker room and the culture doesn't get changed and they don't bring anybody in that might be a cancer and all of these things. That yes, in the moment, they sound really good. Ultimately, the portal is an avenue that the coaches need to utilize to properly prepare for next season to make sure they have all the talent, the best talent they can collect on the Ohio State football roster. Now, I understand Ryan Day's hesitancy to go all in and be all in on the portal and just start bringing all these guys in. I get all of that. Also, you got to realize you're bringing in recruits, and you probably want to develop a lot of guys more. You probably want to do a lot of recruiting and not rely on the portal every single year. I get that. However, with this avenue, with this tool, you might want to go ahead and try to get those guys that are going to be good. For example, Braylon Allen, running back from Wisconsin. I do believe if Braylon Allen comes to Ohio State, he is the starting running back for the Buckeyes. Mayan Williams is my guy. Don't get me wrong. He is a dog. Braylon Allen is better. Trevion Henderson, hard pass. Braylon Allen is way better. Evan Pryor, don't know. Down Hayden, good. Braylon Allen is better. Chip Trainum had a good look against Michigan. Braylon Allen is better. Do I think the Buckeyes will go after Braylon Allen? Probably not. Why? They want to rely and build upon and show that they believe in the guys on the roster instead of making sure that they bring in all the talent and make sure that the talent they bring in is just what they need. Upgrading at running back. Nobody knows what Kyle McCord or Derek Brown are going to do on the football field next year. I think Kyle McCord and Derek Brown are really 2 talented quarterbacks, and I do believe the Buckeyes will be just fine if one of them is QB1 for Ohio State next year. However, don't you want to make sure there's a competition? Don't you want to make sure there's a competition for those guys to bring out the best in them and the competitive side of them during the offseason? Want to know how to do that? Bring in somebody via the transfer portal. Hey, it can happen. You also know what? These players realize they can transfer multiple times and be able to be eligible immediately to play the football. So in theory, you say, oh, you can only transfer once and be immediately eligible. Wrong. That's not true. There are loopholes, and ultimately, if you're a grad transfer, you're immediately eligible once again. I can think of 2 easy ways. I've heard of guys that have been immediately eligible and playing at 3, sometimes 4 schools. I think that's a slippery slope in a place of education where you're saying, oh, if you don't like it, move. Whatever. Also, when it comes to that, you don't want to promise a kid playing time if you don't know if he's going to be able to play on the team. True. You don't. But you got to utilize the avenue. Imagine you in your profession, no matter what you're doing right now in your profession. Some of you might be parents. Some of you might be teachers. Some of you might be firefighters or policemen. Whatever it might be, so you might be a trash man. You might work at the post office. You might deliver mail. You might work for Amazon. Be a delivery driver for them. Whatever your job is, imagine you having an area and a way for you to be better at your job, and you don't do that very thing, and you don't tap into that resource for you to be better. Think about this. Let's say you're in a place of leadership in your occupation and you are responsible for hiring. Well, let's say you have a candidate here that can come in, make you immediately better But there's one thing that's not a hindrance in the job, but might be a hiccup for other people. You're just like, oh, no, we can't bring you in. Why? Here's why. That's stupid. Well, ultimately, it might be stupid, and that stupid thing might get in the way of you enjoying somebody and joining you at your job that can make things better. Ultimately, to me, if you're being very, very passive with the portal and not being all in with the portal, you're not doing your job well. You're not. In NIL, the endorsement deals that can be signed, those are things that are very vital to these youngsters, these athletes, when deciding where they're going to play football next. Yes, the playing time is one thing, but ultimately, money talks. We talk about it all the time. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Money talks. And it talks with these recruits when they're deciding where they're going to play football in the next season. The Buckeyes on offensive line can get guys. The defensive line, they need to get so they can add guys there. Linebacker, you could add guys there as well. The safety spot is going to be very interesting. Safety, secondary as a whole, because I'm not sold on anybody. Cam Brown's gone. Denzel Burke, J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, Jair Brown. I'm not sold on any of the corners that say, oh, you definitely have a spot starting on next year's team. I am not. And the safety spot, Hickman is going to the NFL. Lathan Ransom, to be determined if he returns or not. Josh Proctor, he is done. Tyler McAllister, he is done. You can go to the portal and bring in some safeties that can play immediately at Ohio State. These are things that can be done. Offensively as well, JSN is gone. Do you think Julian Fleming is the answer? I don't know. I have no idea. But what can we do? We can figure things out. And you know what? The Buckeyes need to use a portal. But my gut tells me they're not going to tap into it. They're not going to be all in on it. And the talent gap that was once between Ohio State and other schools in the Big Ten, the speed that they have, well, the team overall team speed is not what it used to be. But ultimately, the talent gap might get a lot smaller than it used to be because the Buckeyes don't use a portal in a way that helps them be the best football team they can be every single season. The portal helps the football team. It also helps the basketball team. And Chris Holtmann has put a phenomenal roster together with numerous transfers on it, which is why the Buckeyes are riding high. They have a good offense this year. And I know I'm excited to see how they perform in their Big Ten opener tonight against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. We'll discuss some things about that as we wrap up today's show next right here on Locked on Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Come back for tomorrow's show. My guy Jeff Hunt is back with us, and we will discuss things about C.J. Stroud and the Heisman finalists. We'll tell you who we think will win the award tomorrow, the impact of losing Kevin Wilson, and if Ryan Day should call plays in the college football playoff. That's all for tomorrow's show, and trust me, my guy Jeff Hunt, love doing shows with him, and he is fired up about this football team. I don't know what's going on with my watch. I have no idea where the music came from, but if you heard that, I do apologize. The Buckeyes basketball team is back on the basketball court tonight, facing the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers is a basketball team that beat the Indiana Hoosiers, held the Hoosiers to 48 points, and they're going to be riding high after that game, coming into the shot tonight in Columbus and trying to upset the Buckeyes tonight. I will tell you this. If you have not watched this team play basketball, you're not doing yourself and your sports fandom correctly for the Ohio State Buckeyes. This basketball team is fun to watch. A lot of fun. From the players to the coaches, the cohesion, the chemistry, the transfers, the freshmen, Justice Suing and Zed Key, the guys that have been around for a while. This team is fun to watch. And I do think tonight we're going to get Rutgers defense versus Ohio State's offense and see how these two teams meet on the basketball court. And ultimately, if the Buckeyes are up to the task of not just defending their home court, but also being one of the best teams in the country and staying in the AP top 25. Chris Holtmann had this to say about playing Rutgers this weekend, or excuse me, tonight, and just some things, some quick thoughts about them. Quote, they're tough, really tough. Well-coached, older team, a lot of familiar guys. They're now fully healthy, really, for the first time all year. Held Indiana to 48. I think they're one of the best defensive teams in the country, certainly one of the best will play, and so always very physical with Steve Pikiell's team. Again, he does a terrific job, and it's going to be a great challenge. And I think the Buckeyes play against Maui, playing San Diego State, playing Cincinnati, playing Texas Tech, playing Duke. I do think the road game at Duke, playing in Hawaii and Maui, I do think those games have properly prepared Ohio State, not just for this game tonight against Rutgers, but on the 17th, the Buckeyes play North Carolina in the CBS Sports Classic. And then that's the last kind of big game they have before the new year, as they play Rutgers tonight, the 17th, about a week and a half away to play North Carolina. They don't play another big game for a couple more weeks, a couple cupcakes to wrap up the 2022 calendar year. The Buckeyes are going to need this game. Not just for confidence, for chemistry, but to just remind the country what they have done so far is no fluke. And I got to give credit to where credit is due. In the area that Ryan Day has decided to not tackle the transfer portal, Chris Holtmann realized he had to. He lost, 6, 7 guys last year due to graduation in the transfer portal. Eugene Brown III, I do believe, is still on the team, but due to injuries and some other things, he has not played much, if any, at all this year. And so Chris Holtmann realized I can go out and get a guy in Sean McNeil, West Virginia transfer. I can go out and get a guy in Isaac Likely, an Oklahoma State transfer. I can get a guy in Tanner Holden, a Wright State transfer. I can bring these guys in and also allow them to help the freshmen, their experience, their time playing college basketball. I can allow them to help the freshmen and the youngsters get acclimated quickly to college basketball. And I think the formula Chris Holtmann has put together between the youngsters, the guys that have been around the program for a while, and the transfers. I want to remind you, Justice Suing is a transfer, formerly of Cal. So you think about all of this, the team has mainly built up of transfers, and those transfers are doing a good job this year of making Ohio State a good foe and a tough opponent anytime they're on the basketball court, which is why I do think the Buckeyes win tonight. I do think, Steve, if this game were in the rack in Jersey, I will say Rutgers wins, but I do think the Buckeyes defend their home court, and I firmly believe, this basketball team is going to be special this year. I know it's early. I ain't saying no predictions or projections for the NC2A tournament. All I will say is this team can be and they will be special this year. Sean McNeil's getting his jumper down. Justice Suing is doing some things. Zedke's being consistent. Bryce sends the ball off the bench. A true freshman, is he leading scorer for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I do think the chemistry that this team currently has will be on full display tonight against Rutgers, and ultimately will be something that other Big Ten opponents will not want to see when they play the Ohio State Buckeyes. Guys, we're out of here on this Thursday. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send all of your emails to jstevens317@gmail.com. Hope you have a great day. One more day to wrap up the week. Watch some basketball tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Heisman Trophy ceremony is on Saturday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern on the worldwide leader, ESPN. Bowl games will be back very, very soon. NFL football coming up on Sunday. I love this time of year. I like the Christmas time. I like the sports that we get right now. And enjoy it. Because the Buckeye basketball team is special. and the Buckeyes are have a shot to win a national championship in college football. Most universities don't have the opportunity to say that about their basketball team and the football team that they root for.